been a day of real hope and real optimism, but history, as you were saying a little earlier, suggests this is going to be very difficult. Where do you think the main challenges lie going forward?
Well, Mark, the most immediate challenge is getting an international stabilisation force together and into the territory, because order in that part of Gaza that the IDF has withdrawn from already seems to be in danger of breaking down. And I wouldn't say it's broken down yet, but it looks as if it's on that track. And this international stabilisation force is still not together. There is a 200 officer coordination group that's been put together by CENTCOM, Central Command, led by Brad Cooper, Admiral Brad Cooper, who's CENTCOM commander. And that seems to be in place now, and that's in a good position to coordinate forces and NGOs and international organisations. That's fine. But what are they going to coordinate? Because the Arab-led force, according to the 20-point plan, who is supposed to be the essence of this, a force that will actually go in and occupy, for the time being, those parts of Gaza that have been, as were relinquished by the IDF, that force doesn't exist. The countries that might contribute to it, if it's Arab-led, will probably be from the Gulf, although they might include Turkish troops, maybe even other troops, like, say, from Indonesia. I noticed that President Prabowo from Indonesia is in Sharm el-Sheikh. He doesn't travel outside the country very much, not least because he's got lots of domestic problems. But the fact that he's there, I find quite interesting. So we don't know how this force might be made up. But this force is not going to be on the ground in days or even weeks. And in the time it takes to put this force together and deploy it, a lot can go wrong. So that's the first main challenge. And then the second challenge are the logistical ones of just doing something to help the 2 million Gazans who are in a desperate state. So they need the food, they need water, they need medical support, and they need shelter. And they are getting that. There's 170,000 tons of humanitarian aid that's been backed up, waiting to get through the crossing points. And those crossing points now all seem to be open as of yesterday. So the strip is being flooded now with humanitarian aid. And the more quickly it is flooded, the better, in one sense, because it means the black market will collapse. As long as there's enough stuff coming in, then there's no particular advantage in trying to sell it or steal it and sell it at inflated prices. So flooding the territory with aid, even if it is chaotically distributed, is still probably quite a good idea. And then the third big objective, the third big requirement is some serious planning for rebuilding Gaza alongside, and there's lots we could say about the rebuilding issue. There's quite interesting questions about whether to rebuild it along the old lines or whether to take the opportunity to rebuild it in a way that would be better for the Gazans. But obviously they've got to decide on that or be part of the discussion. But then, of course, I mean, what is the political arrangement inside Gaza that represents the Gazans that is not dominated by Hamas? And that comes back to the first problem, is that for as long as there is a civil war developing in Gaza, Hamas will not be out of the picture. So, in a sense, you've got to do all of those things at once. You've got to make progress on all of those 4 areas simultaneously, starting, in effect, tomorrow.
OK, Michael, stay with us, because we just want to bring in Mark Stone, who is in Sharm el-Sheikh, where Donald Trump is about to land. And Mark, what will Donald Trump be hoping to achieve with this summit? And I mean by that in the short term. This evening, what will he be wanting to fly back to Washington with, do you think?
Well, before I tell you that, Mark, or have a guess at that, Air Force One, which you can see coming into land just there, has literally just flown over us, not once but twice. Talk about a victory lap, because about 5 minutes ago it did a low fly past above the convention centre, flanked by fighter jets. It was quite an extraordinary spectacle. The plane, Air Force One, then looped back around, and as you can see from the shots which we're flicking between, it is just touching down at Sharm el-Sheikh International Airport. Past the Qataris, the Qatari royal family jet there, another from another Middle Eastern country. All the world leaders who have been invited are here. They're inside this convention centre. They've been waiting for the man of the moment to arrive, certainly as he would see it. and now he has. Air Force One touchdown here in Sharm el-Sheikh, and he will make his way the very short distance from the airport to where we are, the convention centre, right next to the airport. I have to say, Mark, looking at the images here, the Egyptians have put on quite a show in a very short space of time. Look at that backdrop. They will be very pleased with that, as will President Trump, I think. Just 2 days to set up a summit that would normally take many months to organise. Quite the feat. I spoke to one Egyptian official earlier on today. He said simply, we are overwhelmed with work, he meant. But they've got it together, and running 2 hours late as it is, President Trump will be here inside this convention centre in probably 15, 20 minutes or so for the difficult work to begin, his peace summit, as he has framed it, with world leaders gathered, more than 20 world leaders and the foreign ministers of many, many other countries, where they will, yes, reflect on the success of this moment without question, but they will also want to project on what comes next. I think various world leaders will want to make their mark, put their points across about what they believe is important for the next steps of this. I spoke earlier on to the Dutch Prime Minister. For him, he was very clear. This is about a two-state solution ultimately, and there's one massive challenge, because the man that Donald Trump has spent the morning with, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, he does not want to see a two-state solution. Indeed, the whole idea of a two-state solution, none of that was mentioned in any of the discussions this morning in Israel. So there's the challenge, and that challenge will be one of many that they begin to discuss at this historic peace summit, which will begin in the next few minutes. But
Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't fancy it. It was a curious offer from Donald Trump, invite from Donald Trump to go to Sharm el-Sheikh. What did you make of all that?
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Netanyahu was not going, and then for about an hour he was, and then he wasn't again because of the Jewish holiday, which he said prevented him from travelling. Barak Ravid is a very, very well-respected, very well-sourced Israeli journalist who had the exclusive on this, and he is reporting, and I've no reason to doubt this, that it was President Trump who asked Netanyahu this morning why he wasn't coming, and then said to the Egyptian president that Netanyahu should be invited. He was invited, and for a brief time he was coming, and then a decision was made that in fact he wouldn't come, which I think is very, very interesting. And I think probably a bit of a relief all round, given that Netanyahu wouldn't really want to be here, surrounded by world leaders who are absolutely not fans of any of his leadership, or indeed of what he has done over the past, to increasingly what has happened in terms of the bombing campaign in Gaza. Many of them recognized the state of Palestine at the United Nations a couple of weeks ago. Netanyahu didn't like that. But from Trump's perspective, you could see why he would want Netanyahu to be here, alongside the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, who agreed his participation late yesterday and who is already here in Sharm el-Sheikh. So you can see why Trump would want him here. You can see why for world leaders it might not be great, and for Netanyahu why he might not want to be here. So he's not coming, and I guess that gets to the heart of one of the challenges. The two parties, the two key parties in this peace deal, Israel and Hamas, neither of them are present.
I'm also curious about who exactly is chairing this summit in Egypt. Is it the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, or is it Donald Trump, or both?
I think we both know the answer to that one, Mark. I think it's President Trump. On the face of it, it's the Egyptians who are hosting this, but I've seen an invitation that was going out to world leaders, a sort of diplomatic invitation, and it was from the United States. It was from the State Department that the invitation came. The host and the people providing the venue are the Egyptians, because they have been such key players in the negotiations to get to this point, along with the Qataris and the Turks. But there's no question that this summit is happening, and it's happening today because Donald Trump wanted it to.
Yeah, so let's just bring in Michael Clark, who is watching these pictures. And Michael, I was just reading a little earlier a US-based Mideast specialist talking about Trump, and he said he has this transactional foreign policy based on gut instinct, and which ignores the norms of diplomacy, and that gut instinct is backed by power and influence. Is that what is going on here? Is this the gut instinct coupled with the wielding of that power?
Yes, Mark, I think it is. I mean, Donald Trump, more than most world leaders, and certainly more than most previous American presidents, sees power in very personal terms. And so it's his personal relationship with leaders that seems to dominate the way he feels about things. It dominates the way he feels about the Ukraine war because of the way he feels about President Putin, as opposed to the way he feels about Zelensky. He has a feeling about Bolsonaro in Brazil, despite the enormity of the charges against Bolsonaro, of which he's been found guilty. Donald Trump says it's a witch hunt, they should all be dropped. And interestingly, he said in front of the Knesset about 2 hours ago that all the charges against against the Israeli Prime Minister should be dropped as well, that Netanyahu is on very serious corruption charges that have been going for many years. He said they should be dropped too. So, I mean, his sense of politics is very dominated by personality. And in this case, he clearly has problems with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu, I think, pushed him too far. And as we'd said before, the attack on the Hamas group who are considering the peace plan that had been put in Qatar on the 9th of September, when they were attacked, that enraged the White House because it looked as if the Israelis were taking him for granted, Donald Trump for granted. They were assuming they could bounce him into supporting the attack. And indeed, they did, in theory. They said, yes, we knew about it. Yes, that's OK. And then a few hours later said, well, this wasn't a good idea. And the anger in the White House was clear. And I think that really turned Donald Trump around in terms of leaning on Netanyahu very hard. But he also lent on the Qataris, who've been really helpful to Donald Trump. And Trump, on the aircraft over in the first trip over the Atlantic, was saying very, very generous things about Qatar. And so he lent on Qatar in friendship more than acrimony, which is a reversal of his previous attitude towards the Qataris, to lean on Hamas, along with Turkey and Egypt, to make it clear to Hamas that they've got to go along with this plan. So, yes, he used his personality, but this produces what I call top-down diplomacy. Leaders can make things happen by sheer willpower. And, of course, an American president, as Mark was saying, I mean, this summit has come together in a matter of days. And it's astonishing that somebody like President Trump can make this happen by saying, we're going to do it. And because it's the United States, everybody jumps. So that's fine, that's good. It's top-down diplomacy. But top-down diplomacy then needs to be backed up from below. And all of the big diplomatic breakthroughs, not just in the Middle East, but around the world, particularly when you're talking about peacemaking efforts, are usually preceded by a great deal of background work. And in this case, the background work hasn't really taken place. The 20 points, it's not a peace plan. People keep talking about it as the White House's peace plan. It isn't. It's a 20-point framework from which a peace plan might be derived. And as we get down to, I mean, past points 3, 4, and 5, we come on to all the things that have to be discussed and all the things that have to be agreed between two sides, Hamas and the Israeli government, who have no trust in each other, have nothing but a sense of eternal enmity for each other, and yet, in the 20 points, they're supposed to agree all sorts of things. And one of the things that has got to be agreed, not only between them, but, of course, a series of outside countries, is this deployment of an international stabilization force. And as I keep saying, for every day that force doesn't now appear in Gaza is a day of greater risk to the ceasefire that was concluded just on Friday morning.
Yeah, I just want to bring Mark Stone back in because he is there. And Mark, I assume we are Well, it's a day of sort of flights and motorcades in many ways. I assume this is the President of Egypt about to greet Donald Trump.
Yes, exactly that. We saw him get in that vehicle a few moments ago, driving now onto the tarmac, where he will greet President Trump when he comes down the steps very shortly. One thing struck me just looking at these pictures and bearing in mind that all the world leaders are waiting here in this convention center and have been waiting for a couple of hours. It just gives you a sense of the power which the current American president wields, and certainly would like to think that he wields and does. I mean, the world has come here to Sharm el-Sheikh because he told them to, or he asked them to. They've come here because one way or another, he has managed to achieve what he has achieved today and what has unfolded in Israel. Yes, Michael is absolutely right that beyond today, the really hard work begins, and things may fall apart. They may not. Let's see. But it's a demonstration of the type of president Trump is. That he has got the world to come here, he's got the world to wait for him, and then he will walk in at the end to sort of hold fort. It's not all that long ago, under the Biden administration, that people were talking about the end of America as the dominant superpower in the world. Well, right now, in this moment, it really doesn't feel like that. Now, things could change fast one way or the other. But if Donald Trump is busy telling everyone that America is back, it feels like it today, on this day certainly. And I stress, we don't know how this will go over the months ahead. It's going to be really difficult. But I do wonder whether, because Trump has attached himself now so firmly to this cause, to peace in the Middle East, that is the title of the summit he is arriving at now, because he's attached himself so firmly to that. Even he, the guy who loses interest in stuff so quickly and moves on to the next thing, will even he hold on to this one and keep the course to make sure that phase one turns into 2, 3, and 4. The other point I'd make, which is kind of linked to this, I guess, is that in a world of two superpowers, maybe three, possibly two certainly, America, China, Russia, it isn't the Chinese who have got us to this moment. It isn't the Russians that have got us to this moment. It is America. And so for all the talk of America first, which was Donald Trump's cry during the election campaign, this does feel to be like global America, which I think is an interesting reflection, given that there was an expectation, certainly when Donald Trump returned to the White House, that it would turn inward, that it would forget about the rest of the world. Today, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, and what are the White House saying about what's going to happen here? How long do we expect Trump to be there? Is he going to speak at this summit? What do we expect?
Well, we expect that it will not last very long, I don't think. It's already running a couple of hours late. The original timings were that this was due to begin, I think, at 2:45 and end at around 4:30. Clearly, things are running well behind those timings. In terms of who we think will speak, well, there's an expectation that, well, clearly Donald Trump would speak. Yeah, I'm just looking at the timings here. 2:30 it was due to begin. 4:25 it was due to finish. The time now is 5:30, so we're running very, very late. And I do think we will clearly expect Donald Trump to speak. There was, and I don't know if Beth Rigby, who I know is the other side of the convention centre that I'm at, she's been travelling with the British Prime Minister. She said to me that there was an expectation that he would speak. So I think a number of world leaders are due to say a few words, but things are changing. The schedule has been, as I say, made up kind of as we go along. So that might change. But I do think that as well as recognising this moment and Donald Trump's central role in this moment and that of his administration, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff front and centre. Not diplomats, remember, but businessmen, private individuals who Trump brought in. There will be a reflection of their role by other world leaders, but I think also if they do speak, other world leaders will want to mould their sense of what the next few phases of this will be all about, which is kind of what the Dutch Prime Minister was saying when he spoke to us. There is Donald Trump now coming down the steps here in Sharm el-Sheikh to attend his Middle East peace plan signing ceremony, which is due to take place as soon as he makes his way less than a mile from the airport there to the convention centre for that event to begin.
Yes, so President Trump being met by the Egyptian president. And of course, Mark, it was in Sharm el-Sheikh that the framework was negotiated, where Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner turned up, and things moved pretty quickly due to, do you think, considerable pressure from Donald Trump?
Yeah, you know, talk about whiplash. I mean, it has been an utterly extraordinary whirlwind of a week. It was only a week ago that, well, what is it today? Monday. So it was under a week ago that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff flew here to Sharm el-Sheikh to join the meeting that was taking place here, the negotiation. In fact, thinking about it now, I mean, it seems like so long ago, but it was exactly 1 week ago that Netanyahu was at the White House and they announced the 20-point plan. And then on Tuesday, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, I spoke to Steve Witkoff outside the White House. He said to me that he was very hopeful that things felt different this time, that Donald Trump was in this for the long run, was going to push this deal through. And he was right that he's pushed it through, because by Friday, Hamas had agreed to that 20-point plan. It was kind of a yes but agreement by Hamas, but in a very Trumpian way, he then accepted it as a full agreement of the plan, and over the course of the following week, things moved so quickly, and here we are today. Remember that moment in the White House on last week where Marco Rubio whispered in the ear of Donald Trump, said, "We need you to approve a social media post so you can announce the deal first." Well, he did approve the social media post. The agreement was announced first by Donald Trump. Everything fell into place, as Michael said, from the top working down. And the result has been the morning that you've seen in Israel and the afternoon that I'm witnessing here in Egypt.
Yes, and I think I saw President El-Sisi climb into the back of this heavily armoured car known as the Beast. I think that is what I saw. And if that is true, then he's the latest world leader to get a ride in the Beast, because, of course, over in Anchorage, Alaska, President Putin jumped in the back, and Netanyahu also got a ride, but it's difficult to see from here what is happening. I don't know, Mark, whether you can see on a monitor there.
Yeah, I think he is there, not least because the Egyptian flag is on the front bonnet of the Beast as well. So I think he is inside. This morning it was Netanyahu inside the Beast. A month or two ago, as you say, it was Vladimir Putin, and now it is President Sisi in the back as well. To be a fly on that window.
Yes, yes. Quite the motorcade, and Donald Trump on the latest stop of this quite remarkable tour that he's doing today, arriving here in Israel at about 9 o'clock this morning, straight off in a motorcade to the Knesset. Long talks with, extended talks with Benjamin Netanyahu, and then addressing the Knesset, then back to the airport back on Air Force One, 45 minutes later, landing in Sharm el-Sheikh, back into another motorcade for the short, very short ride. This will be to the conference hall where Mark Stone is, and for signing ceremony and who knows what else. Quite often, Mark, these things get derailed to some extent by Trump when he does things like inviting Benjamin Netanyahu at the last minute to this very summit that we're looking at. This is the way he tends to operate.
Yes, for a short period today, Netanyahu was coming and now is not because of a Jewish holiday, which he says has prevented him from travelling. But I mean, the logistical feat to get this together by the Egyptians is quite impressive. And people who are wondering how the beast, that vehicle managed to be in Israel one moment and then in Egypt another, well, that gives you a sense of the logistics for the Americans as well. There's more than one beast, and they've put one here and one in Israel, I believe. I don't think they flew it down over the course of today. Perhaps I'm wrong, but for sure, the logistical operation behind the scenes to pull all this off has been a lot of hard work from a lot of people working for a lot of different governments.
Mark, stay with us. I just want to bring in former Middle East Minister Alistair Burt, who joins us. And first of all, well, what do you make of all this? The release of the hostages, the speech at the Knesset, and now this. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's quite a day, Mark, and any of us who've been around this world for the past 15 years or so would give anything to be there and enjoy a bit of the spectacle. But underneath the spectacle, there's some very important things. Firstly, the fact that this day has arrived, and you have the release of hostages, the transfer of prisoners, the ceasefire, the aid going in. All that is very good. And it would be wrong to be churlish in any way. This has happened because of Donald Trump. And to that extent, the welcome he had at the Knesset and everything that's gone with it is justified. But as everybody knows, now the hard work comes. And I thought what Mark said a moment ago was very important. For the past 15 years, most of us working in the area have worked on the assumption that the United States was retreating. And people spoke about the United States leaving. Well, America is back, and it has a convening power that no one else has. And perhaps because of that, just maybe the next phases to come might actually work.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because what has become of America first, wasn't it? Isolationist to some extent, stay out of foreign wars. It has been turned on its head to some extent. And you say that basically this is Trump's triumph. To the extent also that do you think he forced Netanyahu's hand on all this?
Yes, unless we know different. A couple of things were happening. Firstly, as you say, the United States' support for Israel, which has been unconditional, was beginning to waver. All the polling suggests that Trump's supporters were becoming divided because of the length of time the conflict was taking, the nature of it, the pictures of starvation, etc. So Trump's people around him would say, look, you're losing ground here because of what's happening and how Netanyahu is conducting the conflict. Then the Qatar strike on September the 7th genuinely infuriated both Trump and the allies he was working with on mediation, the Arab states. Maybe those two things put pressure on Trump to say, we can't go on like this. So he then exerted that pressure on Netanyahu, worked with the other mediators to put pressure on Hamas because of the length of time it was going on. There had to be a better way forward. And then, as the president was saying in the Knesset today, the skills of Steve Witkoff and others and all the other negotiators that he paid tribute to, just maybe in some conflicts, there is a moment of weariness at which it becomes possible to strike a deal that was on the table maybe a year ago, but now the time was right. And perhaps that's what we've seen, and that's what we're seeing. And by binding in so many nations to it, which is very different to how this has been played in the past. Just maybe, again, the United States is able to deliver something by the involvement of so many other states that might make this hold. But there's still a long way to go.
Yes. Does this come down then, in your view, to how far Donald Trump can take Benjamin Netanyahu with him on this? Because clearly, if you watched the Knesset earlier, they're now the best of friends. But there is a difference in the sense that Trump was very clear. The war is over, he has said. Many times in the last 48 hours, the war is over. But Netanyahu has said it's not over. Our enemies are still testing us. So I wonder how far Trump can take Netanyahu on this.
We will see. It's a very good question. Something has definitely changed in terms of the attitude of the United States to Israel, as exemplified by the president's actions. But Prime Minister Netanyahu knows that his time of political difficulty, as opposed to the war difficulty, has now arrived. With the release of the hostages and the ceasefire, questions will turn quickly in Israel. How was this allowed to happen? How did this happen? Why has it gone on so long? And who's been responsible? And these are questions that will be directed at the Prime Minister. You saw the reaction last night in Hostages Square when Steve Witkoff was talking about Prime Minister Netanyahu and the reaction of the crowd. Israel is a very, very divided society, but they won't forget the basics of what has happened here. And they will now that the conflict seems to be over, they'll be turning to how it was allowed to happen and how people can make sure that we can get peace in the future. And the comments that by Mark Lyle Grant a few minutes ago, saying that different leadership is needed both in Israel as well as Palestine, are entirely pertinent. Most people believe that there will not be the move towards a Palestinian state and a resolution of the issue relating to the occupation and the future of Palestine in Israel unless there is different Israeli leadership as well as different Palestinian leadership. I think that is now a question that will, not today, but it's coming up on the rails very quickly now.
Yes, that is a question that is obviously going to arise. And I wonder, will the Gulf states, and is this part of it now, what are we going to witness here? Will the Gulf states and Egypt and Saudi Arabia be putting pressure on Donald Trump as this progresses, if it does progress, to be more assertive or to persuade whoever is leading Israel as this progresses about, the need for progress on Palestinian statehood as self-determination?
Well, the Gulf states don't want to lose this opportunity of the different Middle East that people have been speaking about. That is a Middle East based on the economy, on prosperity, on Israel being fully integrated into the Middle East. But unlike the Abraham Accords, which rather ignored the Palestinian issue, it's now perfectly clear that that new Middle East won't arise unless there is a resolution of Palestinian self-determination. And there's no Gulf money going to go into Gaza or anywhere else if it's all going to be blown up again in a few years. So I think the relationship with the Gulf states has changed. The relationship between the Gulf states and Israel has changed for the good. And some of them have hung on in very difficult circumstances. But now they want to make sure that there is a future for the Palestinian people as well as for Israelis. And that's got to be worked on. And I don't think they want to lose this chance. So that's another reason why this might just hold, but there'll be real conditions attached to the future because nobody wants to see their support being wasted.
And just before you go, Alistair, give us a little insight on what's going on behind the scenes here. You've got all these world leaders together, all their teams together, with kicking their heels for 2 hours or 3 hours they didn't know they had. All sorts of meetings must have been trying to be arranged and so forth.
Sure. Nobody kicks their heels. I've been to that conference centre. You take the opportunity. If you're there, if somebody is there that you need to see, it's a bit like a funeral or a royal wedding. people take the chance of being together, whatever circumstances has done it. I don't think there'll have been much wasted time. People have had good conversations. Nobody will be sitting having a coffee, looking at the paper.
Alistair Burt, thank you very much indeed for being with us as we look at these pictures of President Trump and President el-Sisi arriving at the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, as Alistair Burt was saying there, several hours late. But this is, in the eyes of many people, to be fair, across the region, this is Donald Trump's triumph. So he has every right to be slightly delayed. Michael Clark is, and I'm not quite sure what we're seeing there, but Michael Clark is still with us. And Michael, very interesting, President el-Sisi there to meet him, and the Egyptians have been key in all this, haven't they?
Yes, they have. I mean, Egypt's one of the big players in the region. Doesn't get much publicity about it. But if you think about it, the whole of the Middle East region, there are 4 big regional players: Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Iran. And Egypt was taken off the scene for many years because of the revolutions that took place there after 2011, 2012, and so on, the so-called Arab Spring. But President Sisi, who is every bit as dictatorial as Mubarak, who he replaced, or at least who was the previous man of the same ilk. I mean, el-Sisi runs a very, very authoritarian regime in Egypt, and people have different views about that. But in terms of his position on the world stage, he's regarded as a strong individual player and a relatively consistent player. And so, yes, the Egyptians have played quite a quiet but big role in this whole operation. So has Turkey, Erdogan of Turkey, who is much more sort of volatile and plays all sorts of interesting games across the different fronts that he works on, in Asia, in Syria, in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. And in a way, Erdogan represents, as were the old Ottoman Empire, interests across 2 or 3 different regions that Turkey sits across. But Egypt represents those fundamental interests of Palestinians. And in the old days, of course, Egypt was the representative of the Palestinian people. And that's why when we came to the Camp David Accords in 1978-79, making peace between Israel and Egypt, that seemed to be the cornerstone of a new beginning after the Six-Day War of 1967 and so on. And it seemed very optimistic at the time that Egypt and Israel had made a peace and normalized relations between them. And of course, President Sadat of Egypt was assassinated because he made that deal. And the deal has lasted, but it didn't lead to more than was able to be achieved later on in the Oslo Accords of the 1990s, 1993, when we got as close as we'll ever get so far, or as close as we've got to date, to a proper resolution of the Israel-Palestinian problem. And so the fact that this is taking place in Egypt, the fact that the Egyptians, as Mark said, have put together this summit very, very quickly, and it looks, as far as we can see, to be going pretty well, all of that actually speaks very well of Egypt's role in this affair. And I think as the United States reassesses its relationships in the region, I think it will realise, although the US is the most important ally to Israel, and at the moment it's almost Israel's only proper ally, nevertheless, the United States has good reasons to be close to Israel, to stay close to Qatar, to stay close to the United Arab Emirates and to Saudi Arabia. That, and again, as Mark was saying, we talk about United States going isolationist, and in many respects it is. But all American presidents, Mark, they get pulled into the Middle East. And if they're going to get pulled into the Middle East, then they need to have a good relationship with as many of the different states as possible. And every American president, particularly in their second term, when they're thinking about legacy, they're thinking about what the history books will say about them, almost every president gets pulled into the Middle East. They all fail. Up to now, they've all failed. but we'll see in this case. You know, Bill Clinton got the closest. And when he was due to step down, Yasser Arafat said to him, he made all sorts of interesting remarks about how you've been such a servant of peace and how much you've done. And Clinton got really angry with Arafat on that occasion. He said, no, I failed because of you. I failed because you wouldn't take the opportunities offered in the Oslo peace process accord. You made me fail. Clinton was very, very angry about that. But they all fail. They all fail. President Trump has this boundless self-confidence, so maybe this time, it will be different. But like most of the world, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one.